Strange. Why does OBS keep offing itself? Last night it went to at least, at most 80%. Now it's going up to 95. Yet my settings did not change. What could be causing that? It's at 99, 98. 100. Why do you go so high? I really need to find a way to upgrade my CPU. Yeah. Hopefully it doesn't crash again. Like it just did. No, you can continue. And actually start reading. Tell me, have you heard this story? Sometimes the road signs lie. A few weeks ago, my wife and I went on a road trip for a family reunion in El Paso, Texas. I'm now sitting in the hospital room waiting, desperately wishing we didn't. How much longer? Melina asked, leaning her seat back, putting her hand into the small of her back in a feeble attempt to find a more comfortable position. Google says we got a few more hours to go, I said, glancing quickly at my phone, sitting in the cup holder, then putting my eyes back on the road. Do we need to stop again? Melanie asked. Melanie shifted in her seat a bit, removed her hand from behind her, then sat it back up to its original vertical position. At 7 months pregnant, her options of comfort were quickly dwindling, and none of them involved the front seat of a car. No, let's just go. If we stop again, I'm not going to want to get back into the car. Signal lost. My phone's robotic female voice announced. God damn it. The phone had been doing that for the past couple of hours at increasing intervals. There had apparently been an accident, something in the main highway, which would have backed us up by the line at least an hour, according to all-knowing Google. In order to avoid that, we'd taken the detour that slinked around the accident through the desert on a 2-lane highway. That had been 3 hours ago, maybe more. It was hard to keep track of when it happened because even before the phone had alerted us of the accident, the whole trip had been a little more than a palette of browns and grays broken up by the regular bathroom break. As I saw, the New Mexico desert was the skid mark on the underpants of America. And if I never had the pleasure of driving through it again, it would be too soon. The sun had set an hour ago, not long before the signal started getting more spotty, and the highway hypnosis had really started to get to me. There was nothing but desert on either side of us, even with the high beams on. Darkness covered us like a thick blanket. Got any more Red Bull? I asked. If we're gonna go for a few hours, I need some wings. Melanie shifted back into her seat for a second, grunting with discomfort, then returning with a can of Red Bull. Last one, she said. This one was sitting on the seat, so the sun warmed it up for you. Great. Taking the can, cracking the seal, and swallowing 3 large gulps. This will sit well with all the other junk I've been eating for the past 2 days. Without a baby on the way, me, Mel, and I had driven the stretches between Bozeman and El Paso in 2 days without a problem. With her being pregnant as she was, we had to carve out almost double the time, and she was still miserable. I let out a burp that tasted like an atrocious snack and truck stop food from the days mixed up with the warm energy drink I was laying on top of it. Solemnly promised myself I would eat nothing but salad and water for the rest of my life. Turn left here for the Church of Christ. I thought the Church of Christ was back there, I said, reading a dilapidated sign as we passed. No, that was the Church of Jesus Christ. A big difference, apparently. Also, the drive we'd seen a wide variety of local churches, mostly generic, but After passing the one called the Church of Liberty over a backdrop of a poorly drawn Confederate flag, we turned into some sort of game to see who could find the most outlandish one. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the hum of the engine and the intermediate signal loss notification from my phone. I had looked at my phone earlier when the signal was stronger and saw that we just needed to go to the end of this road, turn right, and we find ourselves getting back onto the freeway. So, although the intermediate announcement from the cup holder was annoying, I wasn't particularly concerned. And that was until we saw a sign that said Freeway Entrance, left 1 mile. I thought you said it was you said it was a right at the end of the road, William said, sitting up and grabbing the phone. That's what it said, William insisted. I checked it last time we had service like half an hour ago. We had about 60 or so miles to go, and then it was right. How sure are you? She asked, putting the phone back into the cup holder. Your phone is still saying it has no signal, so it's not going to be any help. Pretty damn. I suggest then we pass another sign. Freeway left. Mine. At least I think so. I think we should follow the sign. I think we should follow the signs. I don't want to get lost out here, and the phone hasn't had consistent service for a while. It could have reset and changed routes or something to have us avoid the highway. Remember last time? I did remember last time. A Vegas trip that ended up being 4 hours longer than it should have been because my phone reset and had taken us frontage roads and street cities. It would have been longer had Mel not thought to check the route on her phone. I was sure that I had seen it. It was taking us back to the highway, and then the next turn was a right of about 30 minutes or so, given the current speed. But when the evidence of the contrary quickly approaching me in the darkness, illuminated by my headlights, I made the most critical mistake that I would regret for the rest of my life. I followed the street sign and turned left. Mel leaned back into her seat, embarking again on her quest for a comfortable position, and I continued to stare at the lines of the road as we passed. Time begins to lose meaning when you've been on the road in the dark for as long as we were that. It could have been hours that we spent speeding straight down the desert road, or it could have been days. With no focal point, it was really up to the clock alone to tell us how long we'd been there. And the clock on the dashboard had inexplicably reset at some point. Something it did on occasion for most of the time I owned the car. Another bullet of Malene to fire at me whenever we get into Marshall's spats. I didn't care. And she really didn't either. But it was another straw to load up in the camel's back nonetheless. My faith in my phone had begun to waver even further, as I was becoming sure even the clock was running slow somehow. We'd go 5 or 6 miles according to the odometer, and the clock would read only a minute or two had passed. I drank the last bit of Red Bull down my throat, again promising myself nothing but clean eating after this trip was over. Moments later, I felt a dull pressure in my bowels. The last drop of liquid must have been the last straw for my bladder. Mel sat quietly next to me, having finally crashed a while back, and I made the second decision that I would come to regret. Although we hadn't seen another car for miles, I flipped my hazard lights and pulled over to the side of the road. I turned off my car and stepped out of the car, relieving myself, relinquishing one of the finer points of being a man and having the ability to take a leak in the middle of the road with not much fanfare and return to the car. Mel stirred, then asked if we were there yet. No, not yet, just a bit further. I had to take a leak. She rolled her eyes and closed them again. I turned the car and started the car back up and heard a sound that sank in my heart and my stomach. Ah, shit. Ah, please don't do this. I turned the key again, and once I heard the series of clicks telling me that the car didn't have enough power to start back up. Resting my head against the steering wheel to feel. What's wrong? Mom said. Battery's dead. What? There was a hint of panic in her voice as she sat up, totally awake now. But the car was just running. Yeah, it was running off the alternator. The battery needs just enough power to start, but then the car can run off from the power generated by the alternator. All we have to do is all we need is a jump, and then we should be able to get the rest of the way, as long as I didn't turn off the car. But who's gonna jump us? When was the last time you saw a car? It's been a while. Definitely not since we made the turn back there. Fuck. That was bad. Fuck. 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 I go. Little pause. You know, curse words. This story is funny to me. Stay here. Stay here. I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. Where are you going? Where are you going? She asked, the panic in her voice rising. Just up there, I said, pointing down to the road. I think I see a sign maybe 100 yards out there. It might give us an idea of which direction we need to go, or if we just need to sit and wait until the sun comes up. I could tell she didn't like it, but she didn't say anything. I'll keep my flashlight on so you can see where I am. I'll just go there and straight back. She nodded. Unless I see a Denny's, then you're on your own. She flipped me off. She flipped me off. I kissed her cheek and stepped out into the darkness. The air was brisk despite having been downright hot during the day, and I remember learning in science class as a kid that desert wildfires had to be tough enough to endure not only the heat during the day, but the cold, sometimes freezing temperatures at night as well. I shivered and hugged my arms around my torso and made my way down the road to where I thought I'd seen a road sign. As I approached, I realized it wasn't the kind of sign I was hoping for. It was made of cracked wood and looked like a little better than the sign for the church we'd seen a while back. In a painted white letters I read, Gomper's Fall. Above a crudely drawn arrow pointing down a dirt path at that night. My gaze followed the arrow, and I thought I could see a light far off into the distance. A scream broke through the darkness that turned my blood to ice. Mel? I called out, wheeling around and bolting back to the way I came. Melina. I apologize for pronouncing her name wrong. I just called her Mel. I could see the shape of the car in the distance, but it was too far away for my flashlight to do much good. I sprinted down the road, screaming my wife's name in a hot panic. What? Mel called back in alarm. I slowed when I heard her voice and held the light up. She was standing on the passenger side of the car with the door open. I thought I heard you screaming. No? You didn't hear that? She shook her head. No, I don't think so. I was in the car until I heard you yelling. Where did it come from? I don't know. Shaking my head and spitting the bitter flavor of adrenaline into the dirt. Maybe it was an animal or something? She suggested. What did the sign say? There's a farmhouse or something about a mile down the road, I think. It's not exactly ideal, but if I jog it, I can make it in about 10 minutes or so. If anyone's there, all they'd have to do is to give me a ride back and help us jump the car. If nobody's there, I'll probably have to wait till morning unless a car happens to pass by. She molded for a moment, and I saw the resolve in her face, and I knew what was coming next. I'm going with you then. I didn't like that, but I can tell that arguing wasn't going to get me anywhere but the doghouse. And considering the scream I heard, or thought I heard anyways, I preferred having her close. Fine. Grab your jacket, though. I'm going to grab mine and a couple of water bottles from the back. A moment later, we were hiking down the road, our silhouettes illuminated intermediately by the orange hazard lights we'd elected to leave on. I doubted the battery would last if those lights were on for too long, but if someone was driving past, I would hate for them to miss it. Mel had thought to leave the note on the windshield telling whoever found it that we'd gone to the farmhouse and we'd be back shortly. If anyone was kind enough to stop, they'd hopefully see the letter and stick around long enough to help. That, or they'd know where to look for us coming back, so they could take whatever they'd wanted from our car before we returned. There was a cold breeze that played with our hairs as we walked, not uncomfortable, but enough to make me zip my jacket up a bit more. Mel held the only flashlight we had, and the beam bounced up and down in the darkness like a buoy. The car was barely visible when Mel shrieked, though suddenly I nearly tripped on my own foot. What? She I said so, suddenly panicked. Look, she said, extending her finger past the head of the flashlight. What? It's gone now. You didn't see it? No, I was busy asking myself why I'm hiking with a pregnant banshee. There's something out there. Just past that rock, I saw a pair of golden eyes. Probably a coyote. They're cowards. If you keep walking and talking, nothing should bug us, especially if we stick to the road here. Mo nodded and then caught up with me. How much longer do you think it'll be until we get to the farm? Don't know. 10 or 15 minutes, maybe? Hopefully. Just then I saw the ice she was talking about, out in the distance next to a large boulder on the side of the road, set a pair of curious golden eyes. Definitely a coyote, I said, pointing at it. You can see its shape a bit, all fours, low to the ground. Looks like it might be a little bigger than the ones that I've seen, but there's nothing much else here to look that looks like that. That's probably what I heard earlier. One of those guys catching a rabbit or something. I wasn't sure I believed it, but it felt good to get some sort of explanation on the record. We kept walking down the path closer to the eyes, and then when they disappeared, it was a bit of disappointment, but not surprised. Part of me wanted to see the coyote up close, but if we got close enough to see it, that probably meant we were close to a dam, which is the last place we'd want to find ourselves. We talked about what we'd do when we finally got home, how soon we'd find ourselves laughing about the whole ordeal when Mel stopped suddenly in the middle of the road. What is it now? I looked around for another pair of eyes. I have to pee. No chance you can hold it in? uh, Not unless you can talk this kid out of using my bladder as a waterbed. And she handed me the flashlight. Where should I go? Why not right here? Are you kidding? Not even a little bit. You probably shouldn't wander off too far off the trail. It's not like anyone's around to see you anyways. Oh, if someone showed up and the universe decided now was the time to embarrass you, I'd still take that over the rest of the walk. Fine. Pulling her maternity pads down and squatting. As she did her business, I took the opportunity to scan the surroundings with the flashlight. A few more of those pairs of golden eyes on either side of the road, which quickened my pulse for a little bit. I didn't like being outnumbered, and I liked being surrounded even less. Mel finished her business, and with some assistance from me to get back up in the vertical position, we were off again, our feet crunching against the dirt as we walked. I thought I heard something then. This time it was my turn to stop. What? Shh. What is it? Another scream? No, nothing. I thought I heard a car. We walked again in silence, Mel forgetting to keep the conversation going to keep the coyotes back, and me listening too intently to think about topics to discuss. I knew I'd heard something behind us. I hadn't noticed it at first, or maybe it hadn't been there at first. But after we stopped, I could make out a faint sound of footsteps on dirt, and that stopped almost as soon as we did, and picked up, or so I thought. As soon as we had, I'd also hear the strange lapping sound just after we started walking again, like something licking the urine off the dirt road. Yeah. When the farmhouse came to view, the relief between us was palpable. We had both been too preoccupied with the growing numbers of eyes on either side of the road that we hadn't noticed the light that seemed from the road had shut off. It was a small house, but I hadn't expected much more than that what was given by the location. It had four walls and a roof, and would have been happy, but I would have been happy. But from the outside, I would have guessed that it had at least a few bedrooms, and behind it stood a structure that looked like it'd been detached, to be a detached garage or a large shed of sorts. We approached the house, and I was about to walk up to the wooden porch steps when Mel grabbed my hand. Hold on now. I turned to look at her. My eyes were wide and my pupils were so dilated from the darkness that they were nearly black. What's wrong? Do you think this is a good idea? I rolled my eyes. If it wasn't, you could have said something 20 minutes ago. I know, I mean, do you think these people will help We're strangers in the middle of nowhere, and it's the middle of the night. They shrugged. I think the worst that can happen is they tell us to leave. They'll probably answer the door with the shotgun in hand, but who wouldn't? Mel nodded, and I saw her throat work up and down in the dry, nervous swallow. I walked up the few steps of the wood creaking beneath my feet, leaving Mel at the bottom. I held up I held up my fist and rapped and tapped. No, and tapped 3 times on the stone door. We waited, listening intently for sounds inside the house, but heard nothing. Instead, I heard what sounded like a soft, padded feet of coyote in the dirt behind us, but I brushed that away. They were known for being incredibly quiet. That thought didn't make me feel any better. I opened the storm door and knocked again, this time on the wooden door. The sound carried far better, but again, we heard nothing but silence. I think we should go in. Something isn't right. Mel suggested. The knot on my stomach agreed. I turned to leave just as the door opened. Who's there? A man's voice said. He didn't turn the light on in the house, and so when I turned back around, all I could see was a silhouette in the dark, illuminated only by the ambient glow of Mel's flashlight that was pointed directly at my back. I'm sorry to bother you, sir. My name is Matthew. Matthew Howe. And this is my wife, Melanie. Our car died down the road, and we're hoping that you could give us a jump. No. The man said under his breath. Oh, no. Oh, no. Sorry? Sorry, no. We cannot jump your car tonight. It will have to wait until morning. Sir, I'm sorry to impose, but we really can't. The twig snapped behind me, very quiet but clear nonetheless. Please come inside. You'll stay here tonight. I turned to look at Mel, who was already walking up the steps. The man opened the door wider to let us in, the clicking on the lights in the hallway, bathing us in a glow that immediately made us feel much better. The farmhouse looked on the inside just as I would have guessed it, but the modesty furnished with what looked like handcrafted furniture, paintings of flowers, and landscapes adorned striped wallpaper covered walls that looked like they were mostly renovated in the 70s. The faded era rugs covered wooden floors that creaked beneath our feet, even with the slightest weight. The man who stood before me looked just like the kind of person who'd live in a house like this. He had thin white hair and a large beard, with yellow tobacco stains around his mouth. He wore a set of beige long johns under a pair of pants held up with suspenders. The outfit of a man who had been disturbed in his bed. I guessed he was somewhat in his 60s, still reasonably muscular from working on the farm, but well past his prime, settling into the atrocity of old age. He had been holding a shotgun in one hand, and just then put it down and leaned it up against the door frame. The man turned and called to someone inside the house. "Ma, put a kettle on, would you? We've got 2 here for the night." Really, they said. I don't think we can. I insist, the man said, turning back to me. The roads aren't safe at night. It's too easy to get turned around. Yeah, I can say that. I thought we were doing well until we saw a sign for the highway back there. The man looked at me for a brief moment. I thought I saw something in his eyes, but before I could make it out, what was gone? It was gone. The sign was all he said, and gave an understanding nod. Do you have a restroom I could use? Melanie asked him, cutting in. Yes, down the hall, and the man stood when he saw her. And again, there was something in his expression I didn't like. But again, I couldn't make it out before it was gone. To the right, he finished. Melanie thanked him and made her way to the bathroom. We'll just be around the corner in the kitchen, the man told her. He turned and led me around the corner where I heard someone else bustling about, presumably putting a kettle on. My name's Arthur, the man said, sitting down at the kitchen table. This here is Ruthie, he said, gesturing to a small woman in a white nightgown who was just then lighting the gas stove. Ruthie turned around and offered me a smile. Hello. Did I hear your name was Matthew? And I nodded. Yes, and my wife is Melanie. They're in the family. Oh dear. How exciting. How far along is she? Not the word I'd use, Arthur said under his breath. 7 months. 7 months? She exclaimed. And where is she now? She's in the restroom. Oh, oh, I've got some things for her. Let me run and get them, she said pleasantly, then disappeared around the corner. Arthur and I sat in silence for a moment. Then I said, are you sure you can't give us a jump? Or do you have a phone that I could use? He shook his head. Sorry, but no, Ruthie and I don't go out after dark. And we haven't had the phone, we haven't had use for a phone in 20 years or more. We'll be happy to give you a ride back to your car and get you on your way as soon as the sun's up. What if we listen? Arthur said tastily, leaning forward. He again wore the expression I'd seen earlier. It was one I didn't understand. But looking back at it now, I think my father, who had served in Desert Storm, and had seen the expression warn men as they stood on either side of a loaded gun, but was determined to show courage in their face of fear, would have picked up an instant. You were with your lady the whole time. Ever since the car broke down, yeah. And even before that, we've been elbow to elbow just about every second of the past 2 days. Good. That's good. What's this about? I asked, and perhaps he could have told me, although looking back, I doubted he could have. Not then, but the tea kettle began to whistle, and Ruthie returned quickly to shut it off and pour the contents into 4 mugs. Melanie came around the other corner and took a seat next to me. Ruthie asked us if we took cream or sugar in our tea, which neither of us did. Then she brought mugs over with Kamoy. No. How do you pronounce this? Chamomile? Chamomile tea bags, steeping in each one of them, and took a seat next to Arthur. We have a guest bedroom at the end of the hall you can use until the morning. I'm glad you found your way here safely. Yeah, Nellie said, bobbing her tea bag up and down in the water by the string it was attached to. Those coyotes were really giving me the creeps. Coyotes? Ruthie asked. Yeah, Ma, coyotes. Arthur said it in a tone that sounded like they'd had this conversation for 1,000 times. I gotta chase them off away from the chickens at least a few times a week. You know that. She nodded. Yes, I just meant I hadn't seen any tonight as all. Probably because they were all with us. There were about a dozen sets of eyes following us up the road. A dozen, you say? Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. They didn't try to get at any of y'all, did they? No, Melanie said, taking a small experimentary sip of her tea. Then another large one, satisfied that it wasn't too hot. They stayed off the road. I think one of them was behind us, though, so I don't think they all stayed off the road. May looked at me reproachfully. And when did you plan on telling me? As, as soon as we didn't have one behind us anymore. They didn't get too close. Though. No, they kept their distance. I'm pretty sure the closest one was behind us, and that was still a ways back. He nodded and sipped his own mug. Good. Those coyotes are serious business. Do you get many of them out here? Melanie asked. Arthur ran a hand through his thin silver hair. You could say that. I suppose more than most, but less than some. I think they like the chickens we keep in the back, but not much else to eat around here that isn't burrowed away somewhere, so it's an easy meal. If they can get at them before I hear the commotion and fire off a round or two. Melanie shivered. I'm glad I don't have to worry about that sort of thing. Where are you folks from? Arthur asked, sipping from his own mug now. Montana. We have coyotes up there too, but they were mostly stray in the more rural parts. And we don't have many, we don't have chickens or anything to worry about. I found one rooting around in the garbage though when I was a kid. I told everyone. I thought I saw a wolf. Oh, okay. I lost my place for this little moment. I am deeply sorry. The boy who cried wolf. Melanie teased, jabbing my side with her elbow. That's smatter, man. I rolled my eyes and fiddled with my own tea bag. I wasn't one for tea, especially chamola. Chamoli. I can't pronounce this. I'm so sorry. Because it reminded me of being sick as a kid. My mother swore by her herbal remedies, especially those that came in the form of teas. Are we really staying the night? Melanie asked, turning to me. I looked at Arthur, who gave me a clear, solemn nod. Yeah, I guess we are. It's late, and Arthur and Ruthie said that they have a guest room. We can stay in here for the night. Are you sure? Melanie asked, turning towards Ruthie. It won't be too much trouble? Ruthie waved the idea off like a fly. Not at all. We haven't had visitors in 10 years or better. Not since the Brits came for Christmas, and aside from my boys, you're the first to come to our door, and it's just about as long. Oh, you have children! Long grown. Arthur said, nodding and staring into his mug. Twins. Twins. Ruthie said, beaming. They're about your age, I guess, and I've got most of their old clothes and things in the back room if you'd like to take a look before you go to bed. I pulled the chest out of the closet already. Melanie looked at me and gave her a shrug. And then she returned to Ruthie Small. Together they made their way further into the house. You two are lucky, Arthur said when the women left. How do you figure? When the coyotes are hungry, and they'll try to get at just anything that moves. If you really had as many watching as you say, you could have been walking to your own graves. I wasn't sure I believed him, but the shiver that crawled down my spine certainly did. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the distant voices of our wives, talking about children and the tick of an old grandfather clock somewhere in the house, when I heard the scream again. It was coming from outside, somewhere close in the house, but it was hard to tell. I sat up in my chair, but Arthur didn't move. Birds, he said flatly. Sorry? We've got birds out here that sound like that sometimes, he said. Sound like a lady shrieking, or sometimes a child crying. But it's just the birds calling to each other. Birds? Mm-hmm. What kind of birds sound like that? I don't know. I heard them called lyrebirds. I'm not sure if that was a name or just a fitting description of things. Yeah. As I feeling the name scratch away something on the surface of my brain, a fact buried under the dust and cobwebs in my mind. I've heard of those, I think. They can copy noises like parrots can, right? I thought they lived in Australia or something. Arthur shrugged again. Say, I don't even know if that's what they are for certain, but I know what they sound. We just heard one of them. We just heard it was one of the birds. I settled back in my seat, feeling better about the scream I heard earlier. It would have made sense if it was coming from the air. It would have made sense if it was coming from the air. That would explain why I wasn't sure where it came from. That reminds me of something when I was a kid. What happened to me as a kid. Nothing like crying wolf, but it was an important lesson. Oh wait, no, that's my apologies. Hold on. That reminded me of something that happened to me as a kid. Nothing like crying wolf, but it was an important lesson, I think. Arthur said his words careful somehow. I took a sip I took a sip of my tea between my palms, not because I wanted it, but because it felt impolite to leave the home mug full. You ever heard of Arthur searched for the words? A brood parasite? I think that's what they call it. I shook my head. It's a kind of bird that leaves its eggs in another bird's nest. Sometimes it'll push the other eggs out, but usually it just leaves their eggs there for the other bird to care for it. I heard about these when I was a little boy, maybe 8 or so, and I found a robin's nest with a bunch of little blue eggs and one single black and white speckle. I thought I found something really special, but so every day that spring I'd climb that tree and see if it hatched. A couple weeks went by, and eventually the egg hatched. It was the first one. And I was so excited to see the little black chick inside. Not long after the others hatched, not long after the others hatched, and each of them was a little robin that looked nothing like the blackbird, which was now twice the size of the other ones. The days went by, and one day, when I was about to climb the tree, I found one of the big robins laying in the grass. I picked it up and climbed up to the tree and find of the four robins that had started in the tree. There was only one left, and of course, my big black bird that was far larger than the others. It started to knock the other birds off the nest. I put the chick that was saved into the grass back into the nest. And do you know what the blackbird did? I shook my head. It killed it. Right before my eyes. Toward a park. It was nothing. I ran to tell my father, and that's when I learned about those birds. They impose their eggs in others' nests so that the other birds will raise them. I felt that a voice outside interrupted us. It was a cry that almost sounded like it had words this time, but the words were indistinguishable, despite the fact that it sounded like it was coming from the right outside the window. Arthur sat bolt upright and turned his head quickly to the window. He stood from his seat and crossed the room with 3 large steps. I was just telling a story. Leave us be. I couldn't be certain, but I thought I heard something scurry away in the dirt. What was that? I asked, trying not to sound as nervous as I felt. Them damn coyotes, Arthur said. I thought you said the cries were from the bird. Them too. His tone coming off annoyed more than anything. Although there was something else as well. The coyotes get curious and the birds get agitated, and before I know, this house is a busset place of all of New Mexico. Busiest on my project. Busiest place in all of New Mexico. He walked around the house and I heard the doorknob shake. He was checking the lock. Then he returned. I think it's best if we call it. Ruthie and I will be up early and to make sure that y'all breakfast. I'm sorry, that my apologies. I misread that perfectly, didn't I? Ruthie'll be up early to make y'all breakfast. But feel free to sleep in as late as you like. In the morning, we'll take the truck down to the road, and I'll jump it for you, and you'll be on your way. I took another gulp of my tea, trying to get the mug down at least halfway, and agreed. Interesting story. So that is part 1. Fascinating, really. Very well. Part 2. Posted on r/no-sleep 5 days ago. Have you heard this story? Sometimes the road can lie. Sometimes the road signs lie. Part 2. Melanie was totally out by the time I entered the room. She couldn't have been there for long, but I saw that Ruthie had sat her up nicely with the nest of pillows in all the right places. And it looked like this might be the first night in weeks that she got decent night's sleep. I undressed down to my boxers and slid into bed next to my wife. I was exhausted, but sleep was nowhere to be found. And so I lay there staring up at the ceiling, wondering about the decisions that had led us there, that led us here. There has been a knot growing in the pit of my stomach ever since we parked the car, and it had only tightened since we'd arrived at the farmhouse. Arthur and Ruthie were really nice though, but there was something that they weren't telling us. If I were watching the night play out like movies, I imagine that the twist would have been that they were secretly plotting our demise, or that the screaming sounds I'd been hearing were those of their victims chained up in a large garage behind the house. But I didn't think so. It wasn't that I didn't think that they were capable. I'd only just met them, and had no idea they were actually. Had no, I'd only just met them. I had no idea that what they were actually capable of. If it was more that it just didn't seem to fit. It was the look on Arthur's face when he'd asked me if I had been with Millie the whole time. We'd stopped there. It was the undertone in his voice. When he told me whatever was outside that was just like was him a story, it was the story itself. What was that exactly? Just an elderly man retelling a memory from his childhood, or was it something else? A cry echoed outside the window. This one sounded like, ah. It sounded more believable now that it was a bird because it certainly didn't sound human. Now that I think now that I had the chance to hear it without other sound pollution. Not exactly human, anyways. Melania snorted beside me, the preamble of a full-on snore coming in the next few weeks. I was sure another scream swung closer, but from a different direction. The birds were all talking to each other. I sighed and closed my eyes, trying to will myself to sleep, even if I, even if it was just for a couple of hours. The house was cold, probably from poor insulation and single-paned windows. I pulled the sheets up and turned to the side, pulling my knees up to my chest for a little extra warmth. I was nearly asleep when I heard claws scratching the wall outside of the house. My eyes flew right open. Was that the coyotes again? Did coyotes do that? I wasn't sure. My dog's up there after, apparently. Wait. Did coyotes do that? I wasn't sure. I sat up and listened for more, knowing full well that in the morning I would feel silly for being scared as I was. But also knowing that the night has a way of making monsters come out. Even if they weren't just the ones in my head. A scream broke through the silence, this one audibly loud and right outside the window. I looked over at Melanie, Melanie, expecting her to be awake, as I was, but she only stirred. I got out of bed and crossed the room, throwing the curtains up, hoping to scare away whatever was sitting outside. I didn't expect to see a face on the other side. I stumbled backwards, tripping on my own feet, and falling into the wooden floor with a sharp thud. From there I could see nothing but moonlight coming through the crack of the curtain, and for that I was thankful. Had a face been that of Arthur, I would have been at least understood, despite how sick it would have made me feel. But the face I saw through the glass wasn't Arthur or Ruthie. I don't think it was even human. Just like the sounds of screaming I heard though through the wall, it was close enough to be human, but still not quite right. The eyes are too big and far apart, the mouth too wide, the nose too flat. Could it have been my reflection? The logical part of my mind liked that answer. It liked it a lot. I stood up cautiously, fear that the face would still be there peering at me through the glass. But as I stood, I saw that. Oh god. But as I stood, I saw that that wasn't the case. I could see myself in the glass, just well enough to convince myself that that's what I had seen. Scared of my own reflection, had Menino been awake, there's no way I could have ever lived this one down. But despite the noises I had just made, she still laid soundly asleep. I closed the curtain again, taking care to ensure that not a silver or moon light came through them. A sliver, not silver, sliver of moonlight came through them. They lay back and then lay back down next to my wife. I didn't sleep much that night. I don't think I could have, regardless, given the intermediate screams and cries coming from the outside of my bedroom window. But every time I closed my eyes, I could see the image of the face that was looking back at me through the glass. A circus funhouse image of a human face burned into my retinas like the flash of a camera lens. I must have fallen asleep at some point because I opened my eyes to find rods of sunlight casting through the window into the bedroom. Melanie was staring, which meant soon she'd be awake and in the bathroom. I checked my phone, still no service, but it reported the time to be just before 6. I got out of bed and got dressed, determined to get out there as soon as Melanie was ready. Yeah, I keep failing to pronounce her name. I'm deeply sorry. The image from the night before had dulled by then. Although the memory still gave me the creeps, the logical part of my brain had in daylight had daylight outside, and by the end of breakfast, I would have myself convinced that it had been the reflection in the glass. I quietly opened the I quietly opened the door and stepped out of the bedroom. The scent of coffee wafted through the air. Although I didn't hear anything moving around the house just yet, I made my way to the kitchen, expecting to find either Arthur or Ruthie sitting down at the table enjoying a mug, or at least a full pot of coffee, with a timer that had gone off. Instead, I found 2 empty mugs of coffee and a half pot sitting on the burner. I didn't have time to wonder where they had gone off to because I heard Ruthie's voice in the yard calling out to Arthur. I peeked out the window to see Arthur's truck backing up towards the large garage. Was it just the one? Was it just the one? She called to him over the sound of the truck's engine. Arthur turned off the truck, stepped out of the driver's seat, and came around to the bed where they were. He had 2 large iron poles sticking out from the back. No, it was 2 this time. We got a 1 mile, 1.5 mile. He dropped the tailgate of the truck, and the 2 metal poles clattered loudly. They're getting more clever, Reese, Arthur said, hoisting the large street sign out of the back of the truck and carrying them to the shed. It was only the one sign with the pirates, and I don't even know where they're getting these things. Probably off some stretch of the roads around here. We're going to have to do something about it sooner or later. Don't you say such a thing. I know. I'm sorry, I just don't like cleaning up the messes. We'll take it up with them. He's your. Arthur looked up fiercely at her, and she didn't finish her sentence. He may be yours, but he ain't mine. Mine's out under the apple tree. The couple walked around towards the door, and I quickly slipped back into the bedroom. Melanie was sitting up. Hey, Mal, what time is it? I don't know. Somewhere around 6, I think. We should get going, though. Melanie stretched. Yeah. She said through a wide yawn. That's probably a good idea. How'd you sleep? I slept great. Knowing that the truth would surely cause question, I'd rather not answer just then. Me too. And she said, stretching the back of her head. Best night's sleep I've had since I got pregnant. Let me pee, then I'll get dressed and we can go. I agreed, trying not to sound too eager with the rising sense of unease filling in my gut. She got out of bed, donned a robe I assumed Ruthie had given her the night before, and padded her way to the guest bathroom across the hall. Arthur had gotten up earlier this morning to collect the street signs we had seen the night before. That much was obvious. What wasn't so obvious was why. Who put them there? Debbie! Amash. I appreciate you defending the house. I do. But whatever is out there, make sure you get it. That's fair. Out she goes for the hunt. Okay. Arthur had gotten up earlier this morning to collect the street sign we had seen the night before. That much was obvious, but wasn't so obvious was why. Who had put them there? The elderly couple returned from the outside just as Mel was coming back from the bathroom. Oh, Ruthie exclaimed. I didn't think you two would be up for at least another hour or so. Let me get breakfast on. That's all right. We should really get back to the road anyways. I have coffee on already, so at least take a cup to go with you, or blueberry muffin, and a couple of blueberry muffins I made the night before before last. I opened my mouth to politely decline, but Mel beat me to it. I don't think I can look at a blueberry right now, she said, followed by a dry heave. The woman nodded knowingly. It's fine then. How about you? I shook my head. I'm not much of a breakfast person. All right, Ruthie said, drawing the word out like she was talking to children. But if you leave this house hungry, it's your own fault. She went to the kitchen, presumably to get her own breakfast started, and Melanie went back into the bedroom to collect her things. But Arthur lingered with me in the hallway. Your wife gets morning sickness a lot, he asked after a silence that felt like an eternity, broken only by the sound of Ruthie's movement in the kitchen. She did at first. This is the first time in a while, though. The road trip has probably taken a toll, I think. Arthur nodded slightly. Yeah, probably. And then after another long pause, you said you were with her the whole time, right? Ever since the car broke down? Ever since the car broke down. Yeah. Why? He shook his head as if that told me all I need to know. Alright, Mac. Alright, Mac, Mel said, opening the door behind me. I'm ready to go when you are. I'll get my keys, Arthur said. The ride back to the car was quite uneventful. Mel waited in the passenger seat, resuming her quest for a comfortable position. While I popped the hood and went to work connecting the two batteries to each other to start the car, to my relief, the car started on the second try. Thank you for everything, I told Arthur, as I slammed the hood of the car down. Last night would have been much worse if it wasn't for you and your wife. I offered my hand for him to shake, which he took with the leathery grip of a man who had spent his whole life working at plants. That's not your normal bark. That's your alert bark. What's wrong? What's wrong, Debs? I see what's on my window. Hi. That was an alerted bark. What's wrong? You good? Nothing outside? Oh, that's good. That there's nothing outside. And again, I have you, the best dog in the world, so that's good. Nice good stretch warm up. Okay, well, thank you, Debbie, for the alert of nothing. Hmm. Though I probably should still be on the edge just in case if I had to go out there. Could be an animal. Yeah. Ah, Debs. Hope you're close by. If you need me to follow you, you already know. You already know how to do it. I don't know. My dog sometimes gets my attention whenever there's something outside that needs to be dealt with. It's strange something's happening now. Something that would catch her attention and keep me on edge. 10:57 p.m. Yeah, I guess that would be the perfect time to make sure I'm alright on edge. Oh, where here we go. Thank you for everything, I told Arthur as I slammed the hood of the car down. Last night would have been much worse if it wasn't for you and your wife. I offered my hand out for a shake, which he took with the leathery grip of a man who'd spent his whole life working with his hands. There was another look in his eyes as we stood on the shoulder of the road shaking hands. He told me that there was more that he wanted to say, but something even then was holding him back. We loosened her grip, and just before I could turn away, Arthur stopped me. What on me? He said, I got something for you from Ruthie. He went to the cab of his truck and returned it with the dilapidated cardboard box. Some clothes for your little one. It ain't much, but we won't get used to them. I took the box and thanked him, doubting that we'd ever use them, but feeling that if I refused, he would insist, and I would still leave with the box. Thanks, Arthur, I said. One more thing, he said before I could turn around. His voice got quiet when he spoke. Just above a whisper, and far too quiet for anyone other than the two of us to hear. I looked up at him and frowned, searching his face for the joke that was there. Nodded uneasily, then said goodbye. Arthur stood in the middle of the dirt road, waving broadly at us from the rearview mirror as a silhouette disappeared into the dust kicked up with our tires. Hmm. See, I know the reason. I don't know the reason actually, but being asked, "Hey, were you separated from your wife twice?" and then saying no when you know damn well that's a lie is concerning because this pregnant woman could not get comfortable at all. And now you leave her alone to go see the sign, and you hear a shriek, and you come back, and she's out of the car alert after she was roughly uncomfortable. That doesn't sit right with me. And then being asked, "Hey, were you alone at all? Did you separate her? Did you leave her?" It's right. Why would you lie about it? Anyways, posting our session no sleep again as a reminder by Dover Hawk. Have you heard this story? Sometimes the road lie. Part 3. Final update. I never thought I'd return to Cooper's farm, let alone so quickly, but circumstances changed, and with them, expectations. It took me nearly a whole day to find the road signs that had let us down. By then, it was dusk, and so I returned back to my hotel. So as not to be out after dark. Melanie stayed home this time. Her condition had gotten significantly worse since our road trip, and she had been prescribed bed rest by the Obgyn, among other things, until she was ready to deliver. Her mother hadn't been happy with me flying out to New Mexico, even with the lie we told her about it being a work trip. But her mother's charging was a small price to pay for what I was hoping to get out of a reunion with Arthur and Ruthie. I drove up the dirt road, following the only street sign now from Gunther's farm, hoping to find an answer to something that had happened to us not long after returning home. I parked my car next to Arthur's pickup truck and stepped outside. I waited for a moment if I would hear the sound of birds carrying human-like screams along the air. To my relief, I heard nothing. I walked around to the front of the house, prepared to knock as I had mere weeks before, but found that I didn't need to. The door of the farmhouse was open. Dirt coated the entrance floor, suggesting that it had been open for a while. Cautiously, I don't see my head. My dog just got up, charged into the darkness, and now barking. I don't like that. Debbie, you can't do that. It could be a squirrel. I walked around to the front of the house. Okay, yes, we were that part. Cautiously remembering the face I had seen in the window, but feeling the bravery given to me by the daylight, I called into the house. "Hello? Arthur? Ruthie?" No reply. I stepped into the house, noting first that the shotgun Arthur had always answered the door with was no longer propped up against the wall in the corner by the door. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I explored the house carefully. Debbie's barking is more assertive. It's not her usual, "Hey, get off the lawn" bark. It's much more of a, "Hey." That's not right. That's not right. That's not right. I don't. Do I need to? Should I have to? Okay. Okay, we'll finish this story, then we'll go check. Hello? I called up. Is anyone there? I explored the house carefully, worried that if I surprised anyone too much, that I'd find my skull full of buckshot, but something that I was totally unknown. The kitchen was clean, with only a couple of plates in the sink, with dried on food that could have been from the night before, or perhaps longer. The bedroom where Mel and I stayed looked exactly like how we left it. I called out again, so I headed up the stairs towards the part of the house I hadn't been. There there were three doors down the hallway from the top of the stairs. I chose the first one and opened it. It was a young boy's room, a time capsule from decades ago. The boy had once dwelt there and must have been six or so, judging by the toys. Books and decorations that filled the space above the bed with in large block letters was the name Jonathan. The next room was a bedroom adorned with yellow daisies over from most of the surface. I opened the door to the final room and was struck by two things simultaneously. First was the body of Ruthie Goomper laying on the bed. She wore a nightgown and looked as if she had gone peacefully in her sleep. Second was the pungent odor of that somehow not completely filled the room, from had not completely filled the house, possibly because the door had been left open. It was clear that she had been dead for at least a few days, perhaps not long after Mel and I had left. But there was still no sign of Arthur. I went downstairs and out the front door, glad to be rid of the smell that followed me after I opened the door. I walked around the side of the house, calling Arthur's name and getting nothing returned. I checked inside the large shed and found the road signs Mel and I had seen driving down the road that night along the third that said a freeway entrance left 1 mile. Just like the first sign I had seen. I turned the flashlight in my phone on and held it up to get a better look on the shed. There was some old farm equipment scattered around the area, but what caught my attention was towards the back. It took me a few more took a few more steps in to get a better look and found the corner of the space had been decorated like a bedroom. There was an old bed with a rusty frame and a torn mattress sat in the corner along with a collection of what appeared to be a few chew toys. Sprinkled around above the bed in block letters similar to the boy's bedroom I had seen in the house, the name Christopher. I took a few more cautious steps forward to get a better look at the makeshift living space, then felt something at my feet. I stood to pick up an item buried in the dirt, only to find part of a chain. As I picked it up, the chain emerged from a resting place in the ground. As I pulled it up, and further, that it was connected to a large metal pole posted near their bed. I followed the chain on the other side. I found at the end of part of a broken shackle. I dropped the chain, letting it tinkle to the ground, and left as quickly as I could. If Arthur was here, I knew that was the last place that he would want me to be. I examined the rest of the farmhouse, wondering where, if at all, I'd find Arthur. And my eyes landed on a shape beneath the tree in the distance. I could hear Arthur's words from the weeks before. Mine's under the tree. I wonder if this was the tree he spoke of. As I drew closer, the shape beneath the tree became clear, and I recognized the man I sought. Arthur, I called, beginning to jog now. Arthur, I really need to. I stopped. It was Arthur, but he wouldn't be answering any of my questions. The top of his skull was missing, and his body was slumped against the trunk of the tree, hunched over the barrel of the shotgun, and it was rested on his mouth. His body was covered in bite marks and scratches that looks like perhaps he'd given himself the least painful death presented to him. Besides Arthur's body stood a wooden cross with the name Jonathan carved into the horizontal piece. He had said his was under the apple tree. He had meant his son. Which begged the question I'd come with and now seemed wouldn't be answered. What had happened to the other boy? A piece of paper stuck out between Arthur's fingertips. I stooped down and grabbed it, hoping perhaps a suicide note would give me at least part of the answer I'd come for. It wasn't a note, however, but a photograph. One had been 25 years old or something. Or so. A younger looking Arthur smiled back at me, holding a 5-year-old at his hips who wore a wide grin and a pair of overalls just like his father. Next to them stood a younger Ruthie who stood next to another child who was far larger than the first, whose face had been scratched off. My stomach my stomach twisted in knots as I looked down at the second boy. The shirt he wore was the one that was given to me as in the old box, but despite the clothes, it was clear to see that there was still something off about him. His legs and arms weren't quite right. His fingers too long, his torso too thin. It was the body that belonged to the face I had seen when we had spent the night and I had opened the curtain. A creature meant to seem human. It just had but had just missed the mark. I put the photograph back into Arthur's dead hand and walked away toward my car. Melanie hadn't been right ever since we'd left that night. She had gotten sicker and sicker by the day. Her OBGYN, her OBGYN instead had insisted that we come to make sure everything was all right, and that was when we discovered it. Melanie was pregnant with twins. The doctor told us it was possible, however rare, to miss a child on the ultrasound, but I knew that that wasn't what it was. The pieces all started to fall together for me. The next few days, which led me to take a flight back to New Mexico in the hopes of that Arthur and Ruth would help us. When we left the day, Arthur had told me something that I hadn't taken seriously then. He said if she would. When we left that day, Arthur told me something that I hadn't taken very seriously then. He said, if she has two of them, take the little one. Those words echoed in my head when we went through the box of clothes Ruthie had given us. We saw that the baby clothes came mostly in pairs, which made sense because we knew the couple, uh, the, which made sense because we knew that the couple had twin boys. But when we noticed that there was always a far larger outfit for the other, I began to wonder why Arthur had told me to take the little one and run. What what had happened to his little one? Furthermore, we had been so concerned about me leaving Melanie alone that night. He had asked me if I, he asked me at least twice to make sure, as if it were very vitally important. And I shrugged it off and not realizing that I had left her alone that night, just once, when I jogged out to get a better view of the street sign, just before I heard her scream. She doesn't remember it, but I believe the moment it was that thing Christopher got her. Arthur had warned me about the birds that lay their eggs in another bird's nest. He had gone as far to call the things making the terrible noises birds, and it hadn't clicked. He had been trying to warn us about Christopher, and however many others like him were living there at the farm. About a dozen or so pairs of eyes had followed us up the trail. Those things didn't like that I stopped him. Those things didn't like that I stopped him. Then they had cried out in the dark outside the window as they listened to him. Tell me the story about the brood parasite, birds and the birds who mimic the sound of children crying. They didn't like it because they had laid their eggs, leaving nothing but a faint white scar encircling her navel. That was nearly completely gone now. They didn't want us to know. I wondered if Arthur had killed Christopher before taking his life. The wounds on his body told the story of a man who had fought hard against a wild animal, and I could only imagine it had been the creature who had been born from his wife's womb alongside his son. He had told me that the blackbird had ripped the others to pieces when he was a boy, and I couldn't help but think the same thing had happened to his son, the at the hand of the other. If that were true, the only thing that could stand between Arthur and redemption of her son was Ruthie, and with her gone, that was all he had left to do. I could see him discovering her death and setting out to avenge the death of his only son. All these years, only to find that the fight was one that he could no longer win. He had taken his gun outside and had searched for the beast, eventually finding him and perhaps killing him before crawling his way to where his son lay and turning the gun to himself, lest the wounds take his life instead. Or perhaps not. There was no way to be sure, not really. I got back into my car and climbed into the driver's seat. My hands shook as I turned the key and started back down the road. My phone found service just for a moment, and I looked down and I saw that I had 3 missed calls, 2 from Mel and 1 from my mother. There was a text message as well that read, "It's happening." I was about to become a father. I stepped on the gas pedal and sped back down towards the main road, stopping only for a moment to make the turn at a now defunct sign that read Gunther's Farm. As I made the turn, and the sound of the engine was just low enough, I thought I could hear a cry carried in the air. The sound was almost human. Oh, that's a good one. Oh, we have some comments too. Oh, and it was given a medal? Once. Oh, that's a good post. Oh, my dear good friend. Dover Hawk, you, my dear good sir, did an amazing job with the story. Oh, I'm sorry, I just now realized I'm reading the comments in my head. My sincerest apologies. Some of the comments read as follows. User add affectionated 8634. Oh no, so how on hell was that thing able to slip a kid into her womb? Freaky AF. Poor Melanie. So she will want to keep the parasite kid, and I take it, defending it, assuming it is hers like Ruthie. And then how will it reproduce so many times like theirs did? Matt needs to get his heavy ass up there and handle a little infatuated or parasitic aided poor guy, or grab the small one and run, but that means leaving Mel down. That was intense and horrific. Poor Arthur, he really tried his best to warn you. I hope you'll make it. I hope you'll make it on time for delivery. In case on debut, take the smallest one and run. Oh, what the was that? To a different area. Oh, well, aren't you something? Strange. We'll just leave you be. We'll try this angle so, for a few more reads. I really need to upload all of these. Give me one moment, everyone. Let me quickly go up. It's a good little series. Let's see. Into this one. Oh, why am I uploading so late? Okay. Sorry. That's why the creep was saying. Hmm. Very well. On to the next story. Posted on r/no sleep 2 years ago. This goes really that weird. That's such a break. Hawk posted 3 days ago, and 2 years ago, and three. Really, such a hiatus. Oh, well, I can't say hiatus. He deserves the break. Fascinating. I can't upvote the post, or when I do, they go away after I roll down far enough. What's up? Yeah, what's up? What's up? Okay, okay. Okay, I'm going, I'm going. Yeah, I'm going. I'm putting on the sandals. I'm going, Debbie. What's ever out there, you better make sure. Hopefully, whatever's out there isn't too much of an issue. Oh, I, oh, sorry, just been on edge, I would say. Um, uh, okay. There was something in my trees. I went out with my dog to just check the perimeter of the house, which I know sounds like a bad idea. It's like, oh, you shouldn't be doing it. Because that's how you die in horror movies. Yes, I know that. But I had a weapon with me. Shut up, Mama. I had a weapon with me. And my dog is a fairly fierce dog. She doesn't back down. She already fought some animals. Well, close to it. Luckily, I was there to stop it. And where we got her, and the owner that we got her from previously has told us yes, she can. Which we mainly got her to protect the house of sorts. Luckily, she's not had to do that job. But near today was close. There was some trees, and like whatever was there is now gone. So that's good. That's very good. Anyways, uh, okay. Um, sorry, still freaked out about something. It was probably nothing. I just been a bird. Okay. Still, we're gonna be reading stories from Reddit user Doverhawk. Oh, and I forgot to send part one to the. Sometimes words look. Share. Nope. So that was part one. And this is the news story that we're gonna be reading by Doverhawk. And posted on r/slash no sleep 2 years ago. Tell me, have you heard this story? Open the airlock. The surface of the moon was a dull, dusty gray, but the view from the lander window was still the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. The earth shone brightly in the distance on a canvas of pure black, surrounded by legions of stars. I and my four other crewmates had just landed on the moon's surface a few hours ago, commenting ourselves in the history books, alongside only 12 others that have witnessed the same majesty in person. Crazy, isn't it? A voice from behind me. I turned knowing all the voices. I turned knowing well the voice of a man whom I'd worked closely with for the past 2 years in preparation for this mission. It was Andrew Ratcliffe, the crew's geology specialist. I could hardly believe it. I'm looking at it with my own eyes, and even I still can't believe it. We're here. Decades of staring up, wondering what it looks like. Well, do that. Or decades of wondering and staring up. Well, do that. Another voice chimed in. This one belonging to Diana Rigora, a mechanical engineer. It doesn't seem real. The other two members of the crew, Noah Thornton, are medical specialists, and Amelia, Debbie, you okay? Hmm. I want to ignore him, but no, I can't. You know, I think we'll read the airlock one tomorrow night. This my dog barking seems rather serious. Oh, no. Okay. Thank you all for stopping by. Means always trying to you guys do. As for now, I gotta figure out what the hell's happening. Yes. What is it? Those aren't your normal barks. I know it. I know you too well, Debbie. Yeah. I'll see you all tomorrow. Try this mom at the door just a tiny bit better if you can. Until we meet again. I'm gonna go see. Um. I would say, oh, something like corny or cheesy. Like, oh, hopefully I make it back. I know I will. It's just much more of a, if there's something out there, and if we can't scare it away now, it's gonna just keep coming back after Debbie. And Debbie's 9 years old. She's, I know I should be worried, and I am going to be worried. But whenever she barks like this, it's concerning because we live in a safe neighborhood. She doesn't bark even like with thunder or fireworks. I know she's just sitting patiently outside my window. I can hear her shifting in the gravel. I don't know if you guys can hear it. But yeah, I'm gonna see what's wrong with Debbie. I will talk to you all tomorrow. A reminder, we'll be streaming Hollow Knight at 6 in the morning. So try your best to smile, make the world just a tiny bit better if you can, and until then, we'll meet again. Hopefully. I will meet you again. There's no reason I wouldn't. Just something feels odd about it. Maybe I'm just tense from the story of, oh, the golden eyes staring at me. I'll see you tomorrow.